Hello, my name is Aslan Price, and I am going to be doing a presentation on perception. Have you ever thought about what influences your perception of reality? Think about this. Have you ever had a bad day at work because your boss kept giving you a hard time and nitpicking your performance? And then later, on your way home, someone cut you off while driving on the interstate, and without any hesitation, you perceived their actions as rude. And maybe you even went as far as assuming that they were a rude person. It's true that their actions may have been rude, but maybe they were in a rush because of a medical emergency. And instead of considering why they participated in the behavior they did, you made an assumption of their character because of your emotional state. This is an example of how our perception of ourselves and our past interactions often influence our future interactions. Whether we realize it or not, our perception of reality is influenced by our emotional state, past interactions, and the subject matter being discussed. Perceptions are often formed in one of two ways, positive and negative, and one of the easiest ways to practice forming positive perceptions is to practice growth mindset and perception checking activities, which I will discuss more about later. We may not always realize just how powerful our brains are, but it impacts our lives every single day. Knowing that our perception shapes our reality and how we approach things in life, it is important to learn and practice positive ways of thinking when forming conclusions about people and situations. I am currently finishing my associates as a psychology major, and I have taken many psychology courses that reflect back on perception and growth mindset traits. I have learned that growth mindset and perception go hand in hand together. Growth mindset is essentially developing and practicing new skills with hard work, which can be accomplished through perception checking activities. I will now go into further detail about common mistakes people make when forming perceptions and how you can improve your perception and practice growth mindset traits. I will also discuss how having effective intercultural communication skills are important and how cultural knowledge impacts our perceptions. As I mentioned before, perception is often formed in one of two lights, positive or negative, and can be influenced by a small detail. I am sure we have all heard the saying that first impressions are everything. A small detail such as someone's shirt being wrinkled could affect your perception of them. And this is why it is important to learn about common mistakes to avoid when forming your own perception. The University of Minnesota wrote and published an article, Communications in the Real World, on their public library website, and I accessed that article on June 28, 2020. This article discusses common mistakes people make when forming perceptions, how we can improve our self-perception, which will ultimately improve our perception of reality. Becoming aware of how we form our own perceptions is the first step to improving our perception-forming habits in our interpersonal relationships. The article also discusses things to avoid when forming your perception, as well as things to help you form a more positive and more accurate perception. There are 3 important things to avoid when forming your perception, which are reliance on a rigid schema, disordered patterns of thinking and action, and self-fulfilling prophecies, which I will discuss a little more about each. Rigid schemas are basically sets of information based on cognitive and experiential knowledge that guide our interactions. A lot of us rely on our past schemas to help us in our new interactions, which can ultimately hinder our communication skills because we already have a preconceived idea of what the conversation is going to hold. Disordered patterns of thinking are biases that also disorder our thinking. Say that a person has low self-esteem and they want to feel better about themselves, so they surround themselves with people who they think are less than they are. So ultimately, this person will start to feel more attractive and have a higher self-esteem based off the negative thought and action cycle that they are setting for themselves.